So welcome, everybody. Glad to see you all here today. And today's session is about local food systems. Last week, we talked about sustainable agriculture and what it means. And today, we're talking about sustainable local food systems. And we will also do some review of last week as well. So we always start our sessions with a check-in question just to help us get to know each other. So your question today, and please share your name and where you're from. And then your question is, what is something you ate recently that was locally grown? And I can start. I'm Stephanie. I'm the executive director for Farms and your program manager for the internship program this summer. And I am in Bottineau, up by the Canadian border. And something locally grown, last night I went out to the park and foraged some wild asparagus that the birds plant it from asparagus that was originally planted on farms. So I made a niçoise salad with some locally grown eggs that I get from my friend April and the wild asparagus that I'd foraged. And so I'd say that was pretty local. Haley.
I did the same thing as you actually, but my asparagus was from my garden. And I just plucked it off and ate it right in the garden. And then we get our eggs also from, it's actually a little boy in a farm just like a few miles from us that sells the eggs for a profit. So that's the only thing I can think of is those two.
And where are you at, Haley, since we have some new people today?
Yep, I'm in Fisher, Minnesota.
Okay. And
then my farm is Roganwood Farms in East Grand Forks.
Awesome. Thanks, Haley. Gretchen.
Gretchen Ivers. I'm in Grand Forks at Stable Days Youth Ranch. And let me know if the wind is too strong and like hitting the microphone. Locally, I had eggs from my parents' place. They have chickens. And I tried kale chips for the first time out here at the ranch the other day from kale that they had grown last season.
Awesome. Clara.
Sorry. Hello, I'm Clara. I live in Fargo. 2 weeks ago, I made a fish and like lemon and egg sauce with fish that I caught from Devil's Lake last winter. And then I topped it with ramps that I had foraged in Minnesota.
Awesome. I still have not found any ramps around here. And which farm are you at?
I'm at Heart and Soil, which is like 20 minutes north of Fargo.
Great. Josh. Oh,
ramps are like wild green onions. They're in like the onion garlic family.
And you usually find them in foresty, damp areas?
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine it's wet enough in where you are, Stephanie, for ramps to grow.
Well, we have the Turtle Mountains, but
maybe,
yeah. It's woodsy, but I haven't found any ramps. So, Josh.
Well, I don't know if this counts, but I got some food from our farm. I'm Josh Goodman. I'm a Dakota College at Bottineau's Farms, and we're growing lettuce hydroponically there, and that I would say is probably the most locally grown yet for me.
Totally. Wonderful.
So I grew it, and now
So you get to eat the fruits of your labor.
Literally, yes.
Yeah. Devin.
This morning I actually did make like some breakfast out of eggs that my brother takes care of the chickens for, and recently we've had some locally grown food like we had soup that we used chickens that we raised last year for, and some other stuff.
Wonderful. And where are you at, Devin, and which farm?
I'm at Doubting Tom's Farms. That is near the Buffalo River in Upper Moorhead.
Great. And Elise.
Hello, I'm Elise. I'm at our family roots farm just south of Fargo, so I live here in Fargo. And honestly, it took me like a minute to think about where I get things locally because I'm just here in the city and I just usually buy things from the grocery store. But at NDSU, we work with like the cattle they raise there, and we've made like sausage and stuff, and we've done ground beef. So I think that's like things I've worked with locally.
Awesome. I didn't know NDSU did that.
Yeah, they do a lot of stuff, a lot of like just meat research.
Oh, and Felicity, welcome.
Hi. I didn't hear what the question was, but I do want to add in, if you're in Fargo, yeah, the meat lab at NDSU, you can get a lot of weird stuff too that you might not be able to get from other places. So it's very cool.
Cool. So we're introducing ourselves, saying who we are and where we're from. And then the question is, what is something you ate recently that was locally grown?
So my name is Felicity Merritt. I live in Fargo. I manage the farmers market interns, and then I also am the coordinator for the North Dakota Local Food Development Alliance. And this past weekend was the spring farmers market with the Red River Market. So I went there and I got some eggs and some rhubarb, and that was about it for produce at the market. But I also grow herbs in my backyard, and so I've just been being able to like harvest some of those. So they've just gotten big enough to where I can add fresh herbs to my meals.
Awesome. Really makes everything taste so much better. It's fresh herbs. Okay, I didn't miss anyone, did I? Great. So last week we talked about sustainability, and your homework was to talk to your host farmer about how they practice sustainability. I know a few of you haven't had a chance to meet with your host farmer yet, or haven't started on the farm yet. So you could also, just reflect on what you learned last week about sustainability. And we can do this popcorn style. So who wants to share what you learned from your host farmer about sustainability? The 3 Ps, people, planet, and profit. How are they implementing those? Go ahead, Gretchen.
It's kind of interesting. At stable days, they have horses out here. But there's an ordinance because they're within like city limits that they can't have manure on the premises for over a year. So they have a farmer that comes in once a year and helps them out by taking the manure out and getting it off the land, and then puts it back into the environment on his own farms. So that's a way that they kind of involve the community as well as that environmental aspect of fertilizing the fields.
Awesome. Yeah.
My farm. Okay.
Sorry, if you want to, you can go. Okay. I was going to say for the 3 parts for people, our farm has been hiring from our local community for years. We hire summer workers every year. We hire from our college for the labor that we need to make sure everything runs smoothly. From an environmental standpoint, we can't grow using tons of tillage and such, so we have to grow sustainably. We need to make sure that we can grow enough crops to make a profit, but at the same time, we need to make sure we can grow for the next year. And I guess that kind of leads into the economic standpoint of we have to make sure we grow enough to make a profit. So we make sure we grow and we sell to whoever we can. This year has been difficult because we haven't been able to sell to the general public like we would prefer because of COVID. But we've still found ways to make sure we are able to sell some of our produce to not go completely in the red and just give up.
Wonderful. And your farm is unique because it's a college campus farm.
Yeah, we're more of a research farm, so we're more focused on seeing what does work and what doesn't work. And sorry, I just moved. That's why I don't have my camera on. I'm still trying to figure out how to get it where it's not, you're not just seeing a light for my screen.
No problem. Clara.
Yeah, our farm does a lot of direct sales to restaurants in Fargo. And so they have a really strong relationship with one of the chefs in town. And so we'll grow things like specifically that he's requested because we know we have a direct market there. But then there are some things that he wants that are just too much of a pain for us to like, it's not worth it for like the labor and the material cost isn't worth what we would get out from it. And so keeping that balance. And then like environmentally, like no-till, minimal chemical application, crop rotation, cover crop, all that good stuff.
Wonderful. Does anybody else want to share? Yeah, Devin.
Well, I did not know that about this question, so I wasn't that prepared for it, but I did visit Downingtown's farms for an asparagus planting event recently, and there she did show me a lot of the things that she does to keep her food sustainable, including cover crops like barley or oats in some cases, and then they had a person from France who knows a lot about different plants like weeds that they can use to prevent other weeds from growing by using them as almost mulch. And yeah, there was a lot of stuff that she showed me there that showed me how she likes to garden sustainably.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So you also have the book, The Market Gardener. And was anybody able to do the readings? Okay, Elise, great. So I just wanted to touch on those. You know, he starts out by talking about why he farms the way he does on a small scale. And also in the ending, the conclusion, he sums it up too. Did you have any thoughts, Elise, about, you know, he's talking about quality of life.
I honestly kind of forgot, but I remember just like really liking it. I remember watching the Greenhorns video and it reminded me of that a lot too, just how they're able to farm on just like small city scales and just like 2 acres, which I thought was just really crazy, and how they're able just to make that all work. Just because small farms do have like a huge influence on what we do, and just buying locally just helps out a lot, and just like using less gas from traveling.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really liked what he said in the conclusion about what is so great about all of this is that farmers and consumers are not alone in this paradigm shift. So he's talking about like, it's not just about growing your own food, it's about like making a difference for society as a whole, like and helping heal the planet. So he said it involves non-governmental organizations, food activists, community organizers, teachers, healthcare practitioners, concerned politicians, and other engaged citizens all participate in this struggle to build a better world with agriculture as one of its pillars. He also had some good things to say about why they chose farming as their vocation. And, you know, most of you are, pretty much all of us are kind of at the beginning stages of our career path, or, you know, deciding what we want to do, how we want to spend our time. And, you know, it's also, you know, many of us change career paths throughout life too. But he pointed out that farming on a small scale allows them to live closer to nature, be part of the changing seasons, and feel like they're enjoying their life instead of being trapped in an office. Yeah, Gretchen.
I thought the part where he was talking about the profit that they make on the farm was fascinating. Because even in the early years when they started turning a profit, it was still pretty significant. And then I think he said they make like 100 grand now off of small market garden, which is just so cool that it can be done and like so effectively.
That fascinated me too. So he lives in Quebec. He's probably not too far from Montreal, which is a bigger city. I'm not sure exactly how close he is to Montreal. Do you think that's possible here in North Dakota?
I think it would be harder just because our winter starts so early, but I suppose theirs does too. And like he talked about the hoop houses and using the greenhouses to extend that season. But I think it would be harder to get that same level of success depending on your location. But we also have really good soil here, so that helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know the answer to that question. A lot of the farmers we work with have off-farm jobs, but there are some that are very profitable, similar to what he's doing. So it might be a question to discuss with your host farmer throughout the season. Like what do they think is possible in North Dakota? Okay. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that is kind of something that I've talked about with my host farmer. It could be a difference of Canada versus the United States. Like in the United States, like healthcare is a really hard thing. So it's hard for farmers for both, like if it's a family operation, for both partners to do it full time. Like one will often, even in conventional farming, usually the wife will have an off farm job in order to provide health insurance for the family. But then in Canada, health insurance is nationalized. So that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. I think you said in your application that you're planning to go to Vermont School of Environmental Law. I might have got the name wrong. So is policy, like food policy or environmental policy, something that you're thinking about?
Yeah, so I'll get my law degree and then my master's in environmental law and policy. And then they have a really big part of that is you can like do like an emphasis in food policy. I don't know if I'll emphasize on that yet. I'm still very general, but absolutely something to consider.
So those are all things that directly affect, farmers' abilities to make a living, really, to continue providing local food. Okay, so let's move into our discussion about local food systems. And I've got a video to kick us off. So this is a video from a project called Nourish, which is a partnership with PBS and the Center for Eco-Literacy, I believe. And they're going to talk about what their definition of Nourish is. And then we're going to talk about, we're going to have our own discussion about that.
I love the word nourish because to me it has a kind of emotional life to it beyond just a really practical side.
Nourish has such a wonderful, energizing sound to it.
To nourish someone is to feed them deeply, something that's very good for them.
I think about the table that I sit at with my family or friends. That's a joyous thing.
You can think about it in terms of your body, like eating food that sustains and supports you. You can also think about it in terms of the land and the community and everyone who helps produce food as well.
What nourish means to me, in the really grand sense of the word, is attending to one another in a way that encourages one another to live well.
You're nourishing everyone you're interacting with. You're kind of nourishing your whole environment.
Your body needs nourishment, but also if you have a connection with the farm, if you've actually walked on the soil of the farm, it nourishes your soul.
When I think about the food that I like to eat and the food that I'm most nourished by, it's food that has a story behind it, it's food that has a face behind it, it's food that I can trust, and it's food that's delicious at the same time.
Food is about the family, really. It's not about TV chefs. We're just a sad excuse for mum, dad, granddad, granny. Nourish to me is nourishing food and nourishing your family, nourishing your life. When you eat and you're fulfilled, it physically, it chemically makes you happy.
When I focused on just nourishing my body, everything else became so much easier. I mean, food choices became easier, exercising became easier. It was really just about taking care of myself and treating myself sweet.
Nourish is a very rich word because it has a kind of literal and a metaphorical sense to it. You know, we literally nourish ourselves with food. But, you know, we nourish our spirit, we nourish our culture, we nourish our community. You can feed things in many, many different ways.
Whether it's going out and taking a walk and just enjoying the beauty of the natural environment, whether it's connecting with friends and family and having great conversations, or whether it's just taking a nap in the middle of the day, I think we need to think about nourishing ourselves on all levels and just enjoying this life that we're so privileged to have.
Okay. So you saw you might have seen some familiar faces. One of those was Jamie Oliver, who's a celebrity TV chef. One of those was Michael Pollan, who's written some books about local food systems and sustainable agriculture. So some questions for discussion. How does food nourish and build community, in your opinion?
I guess I can go first. So, to me, the way food can nourish a community is food tends to be the backbone of building your entire community. I know back in California, which is where I am from, we had whole communities that didn't have enough food, but they shared all their food and built the community just because people were sharing together. They were working together to grow more food. Whereas in the larger cities where people aren't growing food, I didn't know my neighbors. I knew one city away, everyone knew each other, but I didn't know anyone near me. So I'd say that's how food really does connect people and build a community.
Okay, yeah. Any other thoughts?
Yeah. I am part of a local Food Not Bombs chapter in Fargo. We're called the Community Culinary Corps Project. And so if you're not familiar with Food Not Bombs, I mean, like it's like a radical organization that's basically like about like building like community structures like outside of the state in order to like for communities to self-sustain like without existing on like exploitive capitalist models. And so all we do is feed people our next community meal. If you're in Fargo, come to Island Park on Saturday from noon to 2. We're having tacos. And so it's like literally anyone can come and just hang out. And then earlier this month, we partnered with a Latino organizer to do a Cinco de Mayo food drive. And so we canvassed about like 500 houses in Fargo and collected non-perishable goods and then distributed it to the Latino community in Fargo and just building solidarity in marginalized spaces. So all around food.
Yeah. Thank you. I had no idea there was a Food Not Bombs chapter in Fargo.
We just started this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. I did grad school at Evergreen in Olympia, Washington, and they were active there. So yeah, great example. Anyone?
Can I add something else?
Yeah.
So one other thing that I kind of noticed is something that was really impacted by COVID. Our restaurants. That is one of the biggest early community builders there are. Like when you're in a smaller community with 2,000 or 3,000 people in the entire city or town, everyone goes to one restaurant. Well, with the past year, we haven't been able to go to that one restaurant. So any kind of community building, nobody knows what's happened to people in the last year because you just socialize with people, and especially in bars. It's just somewhere you go to socialize. That's one of the reasons you go out instead of eating at home.
Sure, definitely. So it's a connector. I'm going to point out what's in the chat. So Clara has shared a link to the Facebook group for folks in Fargo Moorhead who want free tacos on Saturday for Food Not Bombs. And Devin said, food nourishes a community by making people more healthy and lively and helps people with other parts of their lives, mentally and physically. Your body's mental and physical health is strongly connected to the food you eat. Absolutely. Yeah, okay, we've got time for, let's see. No, I think we better move on to the food systems diagram. Okay. So I've got three images to share with you. So first is a diagram of a food system. So take a minute. It might be a little hard to read, but I can't fit it on the screen if I make it any bigger. Are you all able to see it, or would you like me to enlarge it a little?
I can see it, but again, I'm on my phone. I just can't read the little things.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to read all of it, especially the little tab. There we go. That's a bit better.
Okay, I can scroll through it. So in this diagram, we've got it. So first of all, it's circular. So we've got farming at the top, and that's, the inputs, the natural inputs, sunlight, energy, seeds, water, sometimes chemicals, know-how, labor, and that goes into the agriculture, the land and soil, and the groundwater. And of course, farmers and farm laborers are part of the system. So that's related to money and the food they produce, which is part of an economic system. You've got food wholesalers, food companies, farmers markets and CSAs, grocery stores, restaurants. There's transportation involved. There's also waste involved, especially like from restaurants or grocery stores or the the waste after, sometimes like my crisper drawer is full of good intentions that sometimes go bad. Food literacy, that's going to be one of your vocabulary words in your homework, but that's, a knowledge of the food system. We've got political systems, the policies that impact how we are able to farm, or the food that, how we get our food. We've got the social system, the demand, civic engagement, food culture, education access, media advertising, social networks on a global, national, regional, community, and family scale. We've got our health system. And then environment is also a key part of this. So, which issues represented on this map are most important to you, and why? And I'm not going to call on you because I can't see you when I'm sharing my screen. So I'll let you just popcorn out.
I guess I'll go first to start a conversation.
Thank you.
So first, I should say, I don't think any one of these is more important overall than any other part. They all impact each other very heavily. So just want to make sure that's pretty noticed. Other than that, I would say probably the most impactful on a day-to-day basis for me would be the economic system, unfortunately. Just because I have to get lots of food for myself just to survive out here. I don't interact with people all that often. It's something I've been working on, but it still doesn't mean that I interact with them all too much. And while I do work a lot with plants, obviously in the biological system, I don't work with animals. So I'd say the economic system probably impacts me the most. And because I feel I've gotten a pretty decent handle on the biological system of how to grow plants. I have successfully been growing plants all year at the college, but actually interacting with people who I'd be selling to, I guess that would be part of social and economic. I don't have as much knowledge in those areas. So that's why I think kind of economic system for me.
Okay, thanks, Josh. Anybody else?
I think my answer is pretty obvious. I mean, I'm going to school to be a policy lawyer, basically, but then I do a lot of political activism in Fargo as well, and so using policy, it kind of creates the structure. So if I was in charge of the world, creating a policy structure that is reflective of the biological systems, so working in tangent in that to kind of manipulate and shape the other systems that are more sensitive. Policy can't change biological systems, but policy can change economic and social systems to better reinforce the biological systems.
Excellent, yeah. Is there anything missing from the map that might be important?
Can you scroll down a little bit to the social system? Okay, food culture is in there. I would say I would put more emphasis on food culture, I think, of just how we think about food and what different people's ideas of what constitutes a meal. Not every meal needs a big slab of red meat on it to count as a healthy meal.
Sure. I'd say in the Midwest, the predominant, well, in North Dakota anyway, among the like white European culture. It's food, meat and potatoes would sum up a lot of the food culture. But there's other food cultures here too that, you know, like you did the Latinx food drive, you know, collecting culturally appropriate food for that community in Fargo.
I also noticed that the waste area where it says trash and a brown button, that does not connect back to any of the other systems, which in reality, I think that our waste affects all of these systems in one way or another.
Sure.
And add on to that, if I may, we also have ways to, at least for waste, convert it, as it says, into compost, but we also have ways to recycle trash into other useful tools.
Definitely. Great. All of these are really great points. So I have another diagram. This is a comparison of an industrial food system to a local food system. So and this is the way that they've chosen to depict it, but they've depicted the industrial system as very linear. Starts with growing, and here we're talking about like monocropping, which is what you see when you're driving across the landscape in North Dakota, you know, big fields of one species of plant. It's all, 500 acres of soybeans or canola or wheat or corn. And then harvesting. Farm workers gather the ripened crop from the field. So the work is done by people who aren't necessarily in charge or don't necessarily own the farm. They're, employed laborers. Transportation, we see the big grain trucks, we see the rail cars taking the grain or the soybeans, to the processing plants, and of course the processors. And you've probably seen some of these plants around North Dakota. There's a sunflower processing plant by Enderlin. They're building a soybean crushing plant by Spiritwood near Jamestown. If you drive between Fargo and Grand Forks, you've got the sugar plant, Crystal Sugar, along the interstate. Packaging, wholesalers, retailing, eating, and disposing. I'll pause here and give you a chance to provide any comments about this diagram before we compare it to the local food systems.
I think I'll say something first.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that this is our industrial food system is just disappointing.
They like it because it's efficient.
If it is efficient, but the fact that we have it down to such a science is almost sad because it leads to less innovation.
I don't know that I really care for this representation because I think it is awfully linear and kind of like leading, because there is a lot more to it than that. Like the people that work there are coming in from outside and they're hiring in the community and they are providing, more than this kind of shows, I think.
I think that's a great point. Yeah.
And also to Elise's point, like efficiency, it's like we definitely overproduce a lot of food, but like this local foods is just in Fargo, it's like physically don't have the resources to like sustain all of the nutrient needs of the entire metro area. And so on some level, like something large scale is necessary because we have a large population.
So were any of you able to watch the pre-work video about feeding the world, feeding how many billion? Feeding 9 billion local food systems by Dr. Evan Fraser. He was sort of playing devil's advocate and asking the question, can local food systems feed the world's population? So here's the local food system. And I would agree that they are designed in a somewhat leading way, because this one is, of course, made circular. We've got growing, harvesting, packing. So the same things, but depicted in a different way, and they happen on a different scale. So what is your reaction to this document, to this image?
My first opinion when looking at this is mainly it's misleading, because part of it is that with disposing, we're not just sending it all to growing. Some of it is food waste. We can't use everything that we grow. We can use a lot of it, but we can't use all of it, just because some of it does have to be processed in some manner. We can't just throw that in the ground and expect it to regrow. And then another area I noticed is from harvesting to packaging or packing. There's a step that seemed to have been left out in the other one as well. That was sanitizing. We have to clean the produce as well. Looking at processing and then packaging, I don't see them mentioning making sure it's actually clean. And that is a very important step to make sure it can be sold. Otherwise, I believe it's the FDA will shut you down. Something to think about.
So I think they're trying to say that there's less packaging. The produce you see at the farmer's market has less packaging than at the grocery store. But, some small scale local producers do still use packaging. My lettuce from DCB came in a plastic clamshell, which I now have to dispose of. Any other comments?
Again, going back to Lisa's wonderful point about efficiencies, like the economies of scale is real, and something I think that gets left out a lot in conversations about local food systems is that it's economically inaccessible for a lot of people in a lot of communities. And I would like to see more conversation on how we make these things available to people who work days and can only go to the supermarket or the dollar store or the gas station down the street when they get off of work at 10, 11 o'clock at night and can't make it to a Saturday morning farmer's market, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. So since it's 12:46, I think it's time to move on to our next part of our conversation, which is why I invited Felicity today. So there is a group here in North Dakota called the North Dakota Local Food Development Alliance, and we are working to build the local food system in North Dakota to address some of those issues like Clara just brought up. How do we make local food accessible to more people? How do we address food deserts in our community? And so we meet monthly, and Felicity is our coordinator. So Felicity, I'm going to let you share, and I will share the webpage while you speak.
Yeah. So, like a lot of the conversations I was hearing today, I know Clara said that your farm sells to a restaurant in Fargo, and then also talking about would that be sustainable in other parts of North Dakota? And farmers need somewhere to sell, and people need somewhere to buy it from. And then there's also farmers markets and CSAs and food banks and restaurants and all these different parts of the local food system. And especially in a rural state like North Dakota, all those parts aren't necessarily communicating with each other. So the North Dakota Local Food Development Alliance is trying to get each of those different people in the same room or virtual room right now because we meet via Zoom, but to find new connections and new collaborations between the different local food organizations. So like Stephanie said, we meet on the third Tuesday of the month from 2 to 3 p.m. You have to register for the meetings, but they're open to anyone. So if you go to our website, like you can see here, it's right now hosted through the farms website. So it's farms.org/NDLFDA. You can register to attend the meeting. We also have some of our meetings recorded and the minutes on the website, so you could link to those as well. But I just encourage anyone who has an interest in local foods to check it out. And maybe you'll find someone who's working in a very similar thing to you that you never knew about. And that's really our goal.
Mm-hmm. And I think by working together, we can not only be more effective, we also might be able to impact policy in our state or just have a stronger voice for local foods.
Will you be sending us this link?
Yes, I will make sure to include it in your follow-up email, and I will add it to the resource list in your portal.
Okay, thank you.
Because we would love to have you join our next meeting, which will be June, June.
I can look up the date. We need to update it, the website. I think it's June 16th.
15th.
15th.
Yeah.
June 15th. But you can find more on the website. We're on Facebook and Instagram as well. And if you have questions, the email on this website, ndlocalfood@gmail.com, is checked by me regularly. So if you have questions, comments or anything, I'd love to chat.
Definitely. Okay. Thanks, Felicity.
Yeah.
And Felicity was a farmer's market intern last year. So she's also been a farms intern. There is never enough time to get through all the things that I want to talk about. And I really enjoy the conversations that we have. But I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to go over the experience reports and your homework. And then we'll have a closing reflection question. So I'm going to share my screen. So a couple of you submitted, 3 of you actually submitted this week's experience report last week. So I just wanted to go over those again. So remember, you've got 2 different things. You've got your time card, which I encourage you to update daily whenever you work. And there's no submit button on the time card. So whatever hours you enter, those have been entered. And then every 2 weeks on Monday, that time card's going to disappear because that'll be processing day. So I will send you an email reminder. So last week, Monday, was your end of a pay period. So we're now in the middle of the next pay period. So I'll send reminders about that. So that's the time card, but your experience report is different. And most of you have filled out an experience report. Let's see. So you're going to see when you log into your portal, you're going to see the current week. And if you click submit now, so I always take a look at the date at the top. So this one's not due till May 29th. So it might be better to fill it out at the end of the week, so Friday or Saturday. And then your previous reports should show up below there and what you've submitted, the date you submitted them, and you can review them, but you can't update them anymore after they've been submitted. I am able to update them manually through the administrator's portal, so I can make some changes if I need to. So let's see, Maggie was one. Devin, I think you were one that had submitted the, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can see your face. I think you had submitted the week 2 report already. Did you intend to do that?
Yeah, I think I might have gotten a little bit confused.
Okay.
So,
I think there was a glitch in the system. When I went to do my weekly report at the end of last week, the only one available was the one for this week. And it wasn't until after the due date that I was able to be like, you missed this. And so I was able to go back and do it this morning, but I couldn't find it last week before it was due. But the only one available was the one for this week.
yeah, there was something like that. And then also another thing I noticed, like I was while on the intern portal, I did go onto the farm's intern portal and start filling it in. And then one of the questions asked for like the answer to the reflection question. And I did later figure out what that meant, but I didn't know at the time. But anyway, I did go to the homework area and then back to the I went to like the homework area to look for the reflection question, and then I went back to the weekly report area, and it did load the weekly report I was working on, but all the text that I had typed into there was missing. So it doesn't save that when you switch onto the same intern portal. So I kind of manually fixed this by just opening 2 different intern portal pages, but I think that that's a bit of a glitch and that maybe needs to be fixed.
I will ask how much work it would be to add a save button. And I'll see if that's possible. But yeah, because it might be nice to add to your weekly report throughout the week and then submit it at the end of the week. So I'll get back to you on that. Thank you guys for letting me know about that. So what I'm going to do is, if you did submit your week 2 report, I'm going to manually move that information over to week 1 so that you are able to submit your week 2 report at the end of this week on Friday the 28th or Saturday the 29th.
I was also curious, can you not submit half hours of time? Is that right? Because if I put in like, I work 5.5 hours one day and then 3.5 hours the next day, it takes that half an hour and just like gets rid of it and just made it 3 and 5.
Yeah, I think we set it to just hour increments.
Okay.
We must have, yeah, we did have that discussion. So you can, if it's 15 minutes, I would say round down. If it's half an hour, round up.
Okay. And then
admittedly, what I've been doing is I've been counting up any extra time that I do. If I do an extra 15 minutes, then an extra half an hour, and then another 15, then that day that I did that last 15 minutes, I just tack on 1 extra hour.
Sure.
So I keep account for myself of the extra time I have, and that's how I've been doing my hours. Because usually I've been doing flat 4 hours, but occasionally something happens and I am doing an extra 15, 30 minutes, and I just tack that on at the end.
That is an acceptable way to do it too. That works.
And then do we subtract out lunch as well as breaks? Like some days I have an hour lunch, and then some days I have a half-hour lunch and 2 half-hour breaks.
Let me get back to you on that. Because you guys are part-time and I have to double check what labor laws are for that. Because you are considered employees of farms. So I will get back to you. Breaks. I'm also going to be sending you all official hire letters, just so that we have, and you'll be asked to sign those and return those. And that's, again, it's just a paperwork legal thing because you're technically employees of farms. We should have that on file. Okay. All right, homework. So we're in week 2, your homework. Now, one thing I'm going to point out is that I always put in a little more. So some of this you will want to do because we'll discuss it next week, but some of it I just add as bonus reading. So the Market Gardener chapters for next week are bonus reading. And these are chapters that I selected because they're relevant to the season, you know, starting seeds, designing your garden, and crop planning. So for some reason it didn't pick up my assignments. So I'm going to send you these in an email. So I've got a discussion question for you to talk with your host farmer about again. What do they see as being their role in their local food system? I'll put that in the chat. And that'll be the question that'll go in your, when you fill out the activity report, the reflection question, whatever, you know, that's where you can provide their responses. I've also got a definitions assignment, and this is simply, there's a glossary that was provided with the Nourish Life project, and it defines a lot of the terms that we use when we're talking about local food systems. So I gave you a list of words to look up related to local foods. And so just take a look at that glossary, and I will send you a follow-up email, and I will figure out why these did not show up in your portal because I made them so that they would. There's also a food literacy quiz in there that I would like you to take, and it doesn't take long. It's kind of fun. I learned some things from taking it that I thought I knew, but didn't really, like how much food in the current food system actually goes to waste, things like that. So it's just 15 questions.
Are they multiple choice or short answer? Just curious.
They're multiple choice. So is to see how much you actually know about local food systems. So the rest of it is readings or podcasts that you can read throughout the week. What do we mean by local foods? Economic development in local food systems. This is a podcast that you could listen to while you're working in the field or the greenhouse. And this is a reading from SARE. So the ones that I put in the chat are things that we'll discuss next week. These readings are more for your own use if you want to learn more about local food systems. Okay. So in closing, my question for you all is, What is your definition of local food? And where is my, oh, wrong one. I'm getting our harvest document out. And you can popcorn out. So I'll start by, I didn't cover this, but you know, the USDA defines local food as food that's grown less than 400 miles from where it's consumed or within the state, same state or province if you're in Canada. But based on our conversation today about food systems, food culture, how would you define local food?
I can go first.
Sure.
So to me, local food systems tend to be a lot less than what you mentioned. I'd say probably within 30 or 40 miles of where the food is grown is where it's consumed. I'd say that's really local. Usually the nearest 2 to 5 towns, depending on where you are in relation to towns, I'd say that's where most of the food would get consumed. I know out here a town can be a lot more like 50 or 60 miles apart, but back home a town tended to be more like 20 or 30 miles apart.
Yep.
I kind of picture, I guess, mentally like a place that can be toured and somewhere that's friendly and you can go and like talk to the owner. And that really community aspect of it is kind of like what I think of when I think of local food.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with Gretchen. And like kind of like how many degrees of like social separation are there between me and what I'm eating? Like if I only had to ask like one person and they had to ask one other person to get me in contact with that person who actually grew it, I think that'd be local foods. And I think I agree with the definition of within like the same state, and I get a cheat because I live on the border, so I get 2 states.
Great. I'm calling what you said 2 degrees of social separation.
Yeah.
For me, and I guess this kind of goes with where I'm kind of going to, is more implementing backyard gardening for anybody, even if you live in an apartment, how much food you can actually grow yourself. That would be my definition of like the localist that you can get, is walking into your own backyard and picking it right off and putting it into your mouth. But then also like CSAs, farmers markets, there are situations where obviously you can't grow, but everybody can grow something, and that's kind of where I'm personally going.
I think a local food might make the most sense if referred to a farm that is in the state that you can probably tour or meet the owner. I think generally when we're referring to local foods, we're referring to foods that aren't mass produced and meant to go across a nation. Like we do have a sugar plant in Fargo, which might be technically local, but it's meant to be going all the way across the country. And that when we generally refer to a local food, that's not what I think we're referring to. We're referring to a bit of a community that's working together to make their areas' lives healthier.
Great. Thank you so much.
Exactly what you're mentioning.
Oh, sorry, Josh, what were you saying?
My computer's internet just screwed up on me. I was asking Devin, so is it kind of like farmers markets for you then? Because that tends to be more community-based. You grow and then you sell to your community to help everyone else have healthy foods and stuff.
Farmers markets, I think, are a part of it, but yeah, there's also things like CSAs and other pieces of it. There's ways to sell to your community and still get their input back on what they want. And then there's small restaurants that work with local foods or things like that. There's more to it than just a farmer's market.
Excellent. I think since we've gone about 10 minutes over, we better stop there. Thank you guys so much for such a great conversation. I will get the recording processed and get the notes, especially the homework, sent out to you probably late this afternoon. I have meetings straight through till about 4 o'clock. So yeah, thanks a bunch. And I hope you have a great week.